Welcome back to the GP Productions podcast. Okay, welcome back to the show. And today I've got a very special guest. It's Mr. Jim Krut, an actor. How are you doing today, man?
Pretty good. It's Jim Krut, although in Ukraine it's Krut. So you're
Krut.
right.
Yeah. So I totally fucked up. That you'd be surprised like how many times that I see a name and then I'm like, I introduce the name and then I totally fuck it up every time.
Well,
Jim Krut.
we were asked to do a rally in Gettysburg, where I live, Pennsylvania, in the
Yeah.
U.S. And, it was a rally in support of Ukraine. And my daughter, who'd been in the Peace Corps in Ukraine for 3 years, was wearing a Vyshyvanka, embroidered shirt and everything. And when the host introduced us, and it was right in the middle of the square in town, and he said, "Here's Jim Krut," and I said, "Well, it's actually Jim Krut, but we'll go with that. And here's what we're about." And then when my daughter came up to speak, she said, "In Ukraine, they actually pronounce it Krut."
Yeah.
So you're okay. You're okay.
Yeah, we're okay. We're okay. And of course,
He's
thoughts
a
with me.
peacemaker.
Thoughts with those people in Ukraine as well while we're at it. It's all that stuff going on over there. Yeah, dark stuff. But anyway, Jim, how did you start acting? How did you get into that world?
Well, when I was about 10, I know they were doing a play about Abraham Lincoln, and I was the tallest kid in the class, and they knew Abraham Lincoln, one of the early presidents, was very tall, and I could remember the Gettysburg Address. So I got cast, and I thought, well, this is cool. I did a few other things, like Three Billy Goats Gruff, and I don't want to go back that far. Lead in the high school play Wonder Boy and all these other things. When I got into college, we started an alternative theater company, and because the school in Pittsburgh actually owned the Pittsburgh Playhouse, and there were actual theater students from the school who were there. But we were in journalism and other disciplines, so we started our own sort of side stage company, and among those were like Tom Savini, who's kind of a well-known name in horror and makeup and effects. Nick Tallow, who was not only worked for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood for like 30 years, but he was in Dawn of the Dead and worked behind the scenes in many other George Romero films. So it was a great start getting together, and we did some bizarre stuff. Then I worked in theater. But I got the break in film when Tom, after college, we'd both been in the military. He went to Vietnam as a combat photographer, and I went over as a combat medic. And when we ended up both back in Pittsburgh, I ran into Tom, and he said, "Hey, Jim, I've got this great role for you. George Romero is doing this film, and I think you'd be the great helicopter zombie, that we need for this film." And I said, "Give me a call. We'll set it up." So we did the makeup session. A couple weeks later, I was on set, and Tom had done all the prosthetics from the makeup session we did at his house, in his workshop, and the rest kind of turned into history. So I've been very happy to be the helicopter zombie, regardless of any of the other work or films or good or bad deeds I've done. So
yeah, and I have a picture of you here as the helicopter zombie.
Yeah. See, that's an
Yeah.
interesting part too, because people say, "Well, what was it like working with George Romero, who was the director?" And George trusted the people he was with, particularly like with Tom, who did
Yeah.
all of the makeup and effects. And when it came to something like a unique effect, like the one I was involved with Tom, he pretty much turned the direction over to Tom. But that shot you just showed with the airplane wing, that's where George was directing and had me, come out from under the wing, and the newspaper blows by and sort of sets the stage, looking over toward the helicopter. So the short time I actually worked directly with George, it was an enjoyable process. Now, at the same time, it was my first film, first
Yeah.
time on set. I had absolutely no idea what to expect other than don't talk while things are being shot. Don't make a lot of noise. This is not a party. You got to keep things under control or you get thrown out. I certainly didn't want to get thrown out if it's a chance to be in a movie and a unique role. So I didn't know quite what to do. We'd done the makeup, but we hadn't really talked about character or anything of that nature.
Hmm.
And so when I got on set, and Tom was very busy, of course, but I asked him just before I went on. He said, "Well, second day, I was just kind of waiting." And I said, "Hey, Tom, by the way, do these zombies talk?" I hadn't seen any of the other shots,
Yeah.
like the mall or anything. And he said, "No, not really." I said, "Well, do they make noises at all? Like they got vocal cords, kind of go growl or whatever?" He said, "Well, you do whatever you want. Be your own zombie." So I took it from there. That's as much direction as I had on it. And, having worked in theater, I worked in theater in Pittsburgh for about 7 years, not counting the time with Tom and college theater and such. So it was a unique experience in that way. And it was just a huge rush
Yeah.
because suddenly, after all this preparation, the investment of time, money, and everything, you're kind of the focal point. You're the guy who's got to do it.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I'd really quite been in that situation before with all the cameras trained on, and on a big screen, your eyeball is like 5 feet wide, so every little nuance is something that gets picked up. And we did it all in one take. Walked up on the boxes, felt down, everything happened, and there was this huge rush, and George was smiling, and he went, "Yeah, that was great. That was great. All right, let's move on. Let's do the next one because that's what
Yeah.
you've got to do in movies, regardless
Yeah.
of how you. Well, let's do that again. It was just so much fun." And I'm thinking, can I do it again? Can I play some more, basically? Because it was just such a great experience. There's such a positive energy when you're working with creative people that you don't want to let it go.
Yeah. When you look back on that, like you're involved in like one of the most iconic franchises in horror of all time, like, and that can never be taken away from you. Like it's a real string on the bow, isn't it?
It is indeed. And Maurice, I have to tell you that among my childhood heroes, of course, were Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Thing, and all of the Universal monsters. And I thought, how unique. Each one of them was special. And wouldn't that be wonderful just to somehow meet those people and just be in that vibe with them for a while?
Yeah.
And so when I do conventions and people come up and say, "Oh, that was my favorite scene in the film," and it scared me. I jumped under the bed, or you know, I didn't even let my daughter watch it, and she was like 16 years old. And so when she was 16, I said, "Well, Angelica, what would you like to do for your birthday?" And she said, "Dad, can we watch your movie?" I said, "Okay." So we got a big pizza, a lot of good red sauce and all that good stuff. And the movies, we're running it in the basement and running it on TV, probably VCR. And there's a lot of gunfire and shooting and killing at the very beginning of Dawn of the Dead for those who may have not seen it. Um, and my daughter's pretty sensitive, and she was kind of wincing
Yeah.
and after a few minutes, she turned to me and she said, "Dad, you don't get shot in this, do you?" And I said, "Oh no, honey, no, I don't get shot. It's okay." So then when my scene came up and I said, "By the way, that's me." "Oh yes." Then she got very excited, and when it was over, she, wow, it's terrible, terrible, terrible. Can we watch it again? I said, sure, of course. Not the whole thing, but she said, just your parts. I want to see that again. So, so it was kind of a neat opportunity to build relationships in a different kind of way with my daughters.
Yeah.
One had gone on to college, and we were going to visit her, my wife and I, and she said, "Oh, by the way, Dad, my boyfriend wants to meet you." I said, "Oh, this must be pretty serious. I hope it's not too serious that you're not going to finish college or something like that."
Yeah.
So we're waiting in her room, and her boyfriend comes in with like three other guys, and she said, "You're Jim Krut, the helicopter zombie?" And I said, I was both relieved and honored and surprised. There's this mixed blessing of being recognized that way sometimes. So
Yeah.
it's still been through the years much fun.
When you look back, like that film came out in 1978, and another movie that came out, I think it was 1978 as well, was like Halloween. And
Mhm.
if you look back to where we are in horror now, like films like Dawn of the Dead, Halloween, they still stand the test of time. What do you think of modern horror? And I know you've got some projects coming up and stuff like that, but it's a lot different now than it was back then, isn't it?
Well, I hate to use the word derivative, but a lot of things are cabin in the woods. You know, teenagers get together. Somebody, I hear
Yeah.
a terrible noise. Well, I better put on my nightie and go out in the porch and look in the dark. Yeah, it's just some of it is pretty strange. One of the films I have coming up, I read the whole script and I said, I never thought of this as a cabin in the woods. It's just such a great script. It's beautiful. But I can't really talk too much about that at this point.
Hmm.
But there were some things like the remakes have maybe addressed a new audience and people who see things for the first time, not necessarily the original, tend to identify more with that. So those who saw the original Dawn of the Dead, they're kind of locked into that for life, I would say. When you see the remake of Dawn of the Dead or that other film that was also called Dawn of the Dead because it
Yeah.
didn't, it wasn't a shot for shot recreation or anything of that nature. People really liked that. They were absorbed by that. And the groups would kind of intertwine. But there have been a lot of changes over the years in people's appreciation and both the riskiness of filmmakers, what they're willing to show,
Yeah.
and I would say also because of some of the techniques, both in terms of makeup and effects, that were not possible years ago.
Yeah.
The top of my head being taken off of a helicopter blade was considered a practical effect. That means it was done with actually me there with something on top of my head that got pulled off by monofilament fishing line off camera, and the blood was pumped up through tubes in the back by Tom and another guy behind the boxes that I was standing on under the helicopter blade. But you get into computer generated graphics, you get into many
Yeah.
other types of, wow, we can do these things with cameras and software now that we could not do before. So we can apparently make this person go through these things. There is a difference. Some people see it, some don't. And sometimes you just get swept up in the music and the noise and the emotion of whatever's going on, and it just carries you through, and you don't pay that much attention to it. But I think one of the one of the bits of advice I got was that if you go to hear an orchestra, see if you can pick out any particular instruments
Yeah.
rather than the whole swell of sound. Can you be a little more discriminating? And that it really it's beautiful because it gives you a little different ear, but also an appreciation for how things work together. So in a film, as in theater, you have to work together. Of course, the difference with film is you can do your line many times. Whether you get it right or you get it wrong the first time doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can do it beautifully, and the director may still say, "Hey, that was wonderful. Let's shoot it again and change the lights over there." Or, "Oh, the audio was off. Oh, a jet plane went over and they didn't exist during this time period," or whatever. the situation might be. When you're doing theater, live theater demands basically that you know the entire script, not only your role, but all of the cues leading up to it, what comes after it, how it all fits together. So you develop an ensemble feeling with the other cast members. And you don't always have a chance to do that in a film unless you're part of the danger team that rushes through all the scenes together, and you have to coordinate and cooperate and try to be true to the art of what you're trying to create. And so there's a different feeling there, but there's a different demand on the actor as well. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I haven't really had that caffeine today, but it's still early here in the U.S., so we're good.
Yeah. In terms of live theater, then, like a lot of actors I talk to have a background in live theater. How how much difficult is it being on stage? Do you find it more nerve-wracking? Obviously, like with a film, you can retake whatever. But do you enjoy the pressure, or did you enjoy the pressure of being live in front of an audience?
I'd say I absolutely loved being on stage.
Yeah.
It's not a matter so much of, well, I can say my lines, I know my lines. It's a
Hmm.
matter of, can I put the interpretation on those lines and put that extra pressure on myself to do those right while still paying attention to that cue, that other person moving that way, that maybe that table is out of place. Um, we did a we did well, we started a theater company in Gettysburg in around 2000, and we ran it for about 7 years. And we did a lot of, I would say, very tricky, difficult, and not necessarily obscure, but challenging plays.
Hmm.
And one of them was called American Buffalo. And the whole point was it's an American Buffalo nickel, which supposedly had great value. And I played a pawn shop dealer in the Chicago area. And another person comes in, and we start talking about the value of this because somebody had bought it, and now that I've looked up the value, we want to get it back, perhaps through thievery. So that's kind of like the premise of it. Well, we got through a certain part of the play, the first part, and we're ready to almost go off, and we realized we skipped the whole discussion about the nickel.
Oh,
And I said, take a look at this over here in the showcase, just a moment. There's something else I want you to see. So going, what the hell are we going to do now? Let's pick it up from, okay. And we sort of, I would say, seamlessly, because unless the audience knows the script, everything they see is the way it's supposed to be.
yeah.
We wrapped that part right back in, did the exit, and then the next scene, we picked up again. Those are things you remember, because it would have been terribly embarrassing to say, line, I need a line, literally a
Yeah.
lifeline. And there, I've worked sometimes with actors who have had difficulty learning lines, and sometimes plays like American Buffalo had a lot of repetitive answers, questions, and sections. So it was very easy to kind of go from this page to 2 pages later. And you think you're still in the same, because it can still flow. So anyway, it can be a challenge, but it's a challenge that athletes try to outdo themselves at times by running faster than they did, jumping higher than they did, whatever, you know, doing a motorcycle and doing so many flips and hopefully landing safely. Being on stage is not quite that dangerous, as risky, but you do have a lot invested in it, and you bring all of your resources, all of your experience and background to it. How do you cover if you do have a flub? If one of your fellow actors has a flub, how are you going to cover that? Can you make it? You don't say he's a dummy. No, you don't do that. You try to help out because you are part of an ensemble, and it's
Yeah.
not one person's success; it's everybody's success. And when you understand and realize that, everybody is part of that same machine.
Yeah. Have you like ever got a script and you were like, no way am I doing this, no chance in hell? And what would be the reason for it? I'm not going to ask you to hang anybody here, but I'm just saying, what's a no-go for you in a script? If you look at a script and you say, right, I'm not doing this movie, what would be the reason behind it?
I've had a couple that way. One or two were cabin in the woods types, and I thought
Yeah.
this has been done, to death. A couple others have been, hey, we've got this great scene where we're going to, the saw blade is going to come along and it's just going to take the top of your head off. Wouldn't that be a lot of fun? I said, ain't no way in hell, thank you. It's been done well. It was done once right. And in tribute to that, I'm not trying to repeat that effect or reference it. I think if you've got a good script and a good film and good other actors, it's unfair to them
Hmm.
to try to reference something just because you get a little kick out of it. Oh,
Is do people just do that because of your scene in Dawn of the Dead? They might script you in just for a
sure.
head chop.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not really, what's the way of putting it? Tasteful? I don't know.
Um, I actually had one that was recent, and they said, "Hey, we have you in this scene, and it's you're talking about something, but then you make this reference to uh, getting the top of your head taken off." And I said, um, "I have to tell you that in order to protect my own brand, I can't do it that way. I can rewrite it. I'll rewrite the scene if you would like, and if it works for you, I'll be happy to shoot it that way." And we did, and
Okay.
they said we totally understand, and it was just a thought because sometimes films are, hey, what if we did that? Well, what if you did something that was stronger and better rather than
Mm.
here's an easy choice or here's a gamble.
Yeah.
So, but one of the first other films I did from the time that I did Dawn to like 2000, so we were looking like 20 couple years.
Yeah, big gap. Yeah.
And I'd done some theater and things in the meantime, but my
Yeah.
work just had me on call, all the time. So I went to do an audition for a film in Harrisburg, which is the state capital here in Pennsylvania, and it was like a 40-mile drive. So I went up and I said, "Well, I'm here to do an audition for this film." And they said, "Well, you're just here at the tail end of the process. Fill out the form here, paperwork and so forth, and they'll be calling you in. Just have a seat." And I just got about halfway through the form, and I got called in, and they said, "Well, we just want to talk with you. It's not you don't have to read lines or anything. We just want to talk with you."
Mm.
And as we were talking, they said to each other, the two people said, "I think he'd be perfect for that role as Kenneth, the technician, who runs the power plant. That'd be a great role." I said, okay. Well, look, we're going to call you. We're going to call you. Okay. Well, so later that night, I get a call from the director, and he says, "Why didn't you tell me you were the helicopter zombie?"
Is the helicopter zombie just following you everywhere?
It's true. It's true. And
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I didn't think it was pertinent. Besides, I wrote it on the paper, previous acting experience and so forth."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, we didn't get around to reading that. We just cast you, and then we got around to reading it." So to me, that was a truer statement. That I thought in my heart that was a better reception rather than because I did something in the past,
Yeah.
that I fit the role. Because I know I've done roles where people have said, "I saw you in this play, and somebody else cast you in this role for Lifetime TV, and then you were a judge and so forth. And I heard you did a great job and worked well with everybody. And we're doing this new TV series, and we were thinking of you, and we just want to ask you a few questions." And I said, "Oh, okay." And they came around to this. "Oh, okay, that's good. That's good. And how tall are you?" And I said, 6 feet 4 inches. And they said, "Oh, well, gee, well, look, if if we think we are going to be able to use you, we'll give you another call back, but we have a few more calls to make. Thank you very much. So no matter what you think you are or how you come across, it's what the director or the casting person has in mind for that role. And if you don't fit that image, you're not in the role. Or if they have period clothing that's only a certain size, you're not going to fit into it. So for many reasons, you're not going to get cast, you're not going to get called, and you can't take any of it personally. And sometimes that's a very hard lesson for people to take. They say,
Yeah.
well, I must be great. People, I did this other film. Has nothing to do with what you're doing now. The
Yeah.
past can follow you, it can help you somewhat, but you still have to meet the requirements of today. So,
Mhm. Let's talk about the convention world, the horror convention world.
sure,
I
sure.
love talking to guests about that because it's like the best hidden gem that there is, isn't it? And like, how did you first become involved in it, and what do you make of the whole thing?
I absolutely love horror film conventions. My first experience was when I was living in central Pennsylvania, and I got a call from a person I'd worked with in Pittsburgh. He said, "We finally tracked you down after 20 some years. And they're doing this show called Cinema Wasteland in Cleveland, Ohio, and we want you to come." And I said, to do what? And they said, "We're doing a Dawn of the Dead reunion, and we're going to bring in the cast and so forth." And I said, "Well, it sounds like fun, but like, what would I do there?" And they said, "Well, you would get your picture taken a lot, and you would sign autographs, and you'd get to meet a lot of people." And I said, "Well, that's a long way to drive." And they said, um, "Your expenses are going to be covered, your hotel, your meals, and things like that. We just want to this is going to be the first time bringing all these folks together." And I decided to go ahead and do it. And I met all these folks I hadn't seen in years. It was
Yeah.
an absolute family reunion. I wouldn't say we exactly picked up where we had been before, but like Lenny Lee's, the machete zombie, and he and I were sitting next to each other. I said, "Have you ever done this before?" He said, "No." He said, "Oh, we're supposed to charge people for our autographs?" They had given us some photos,
Yeah.
and he said, "Well, what do you think we should do? Like two for $5 or something?" I said, "I don't know. What do you think? $5? Okay." And so we were doing that, but then we found that there were a couple people who came in with loads of things to be signed,
Yes.
and then took them away and
And
sold them
sold them.
at a markup. And
Yeah, that's
that was the first lesson, that you have to kind of, I would say, be aware of the marketplace and where you fit in
yeah.
it, and that you don't
Don't
get taken
undersell
advantage of,
yourself.
and that your fans don't get taken advantage of.
Yeah.
There can also be fake autograph mills out there. We all try to have unique autographs, and I try to make mine legible. So I think that's difficult for people to imitate sometimes. But um, going from there, somebody said, they at that same show, they said, "We're doing a convention in Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks, and we'd like to have you there for that." I said, "Oh." So it's like that exposure, one thing led to another. And so over the last 20 odd years, I've been doing conventions. I've done,
Mm.
a couple in the UK. I did three with Weekend of the Dead. And the latest, I think the seventh edition of that is coming up in November. And Greg Nicotero and a lot of folks from the Romero films. It's all focused on the George Romero ones. I've done a couple shows in Germany. Uh, so traveling all over the U.S. to do conventions, but still, I think my favorite is still in Pittsburgh, simply because the latest ones have been at the Monroeville Mall, where Dawn of the Dead was originally filmed. So people can
Yeah.
do tours of the mall, be on the very stairs or near the elevator or the store where this or that took place. And also, they do tours behind the scenes, the boiler room, the hidden storage closet, and where this took place. And they're wonderfully, wonderfully narrated and I was going to say docented, but guided. And it's just a wonderful get together time for people. It's unique to have people, thousands of people, come to the same setting where the film that they love was made.
Yeah. What's the funniest thing that you've ever seen at a convention, or the funniest thing that someone has ever got you to sign?
Well, it was one of my earlier conventions, and I was I got talked into doing T-shirts,
Yeah.
and so I had my helicopter zombie T-shirts, and a young lady wasn't sure which size, and I said, well, look, you can take it back somewhere and check it out. Take two of them and see which size works, and you just bring the other one back, and we'll work on that. So she came back with one, and I think this fits very, very well. And she said, now, can I ask you a personal favor? And I said, well, what's that? And she said, would you autograph it for me? And I said, well, sure. You want to take it off? And she said, no. And right here. And her boyfriend is standing right beside her. And I don't, well, you've heard the term sweating bullets. And I'm thinking, let's just go ahead and do it. How's that look? Does that make you happy? And she said, oh, yeah. And her boyfriend was smiling. So I figured life was good after that.
Yeah.
And we were all still alive. So, there are strange things like that sometimes, requests.
Yeah.
Odd things that people want you to sign. I ripped this board off the house that was it. And oh, God, don't be tearing apart people's houses just because they were in a movie somewhere. You could
Sorry.
get shot doing that.
Yeah.
Wild West.
It's a crazy world. I've actually never been to a horror convention. I know all about them from various people I talk to. There was one in Ireland years ago, that was just very, very poorly advertised, and I was only working maybe 20 miles from less than 20 miles from where this convention was, and there was loads of people like Alex Vincent from Child's Play, Kane Hodder, a lot of
Oh,
people like that. And I didn't even know about it till like 4 or 5 years afterwards when I was just researching, has there ever been a horror convention in Ireland? Apparently it was very poorly ran, very poorly advertised, lost a lot of money, and I don't think it'll be
uh,
coming back again, unfortunately, unless somebody else picks it up in the future, and hopefully they do.
well, there are more now. Of course, the economy has been tough. COVID has been tough on
Yes.
conventions. It's uh, it's been very difficult too because more actors and guests are working with agents, and sometimes the agents have particular demands. And for somebody who's trying to produce a convention, you have to measure whether the expenses and the risk are worth it.
Yeah.
Um, like Weekend of the Dead is completely nonprofit. I mean, by that, nobody makes a penny, and they've been doing it for 7 years and bringing in wonderful guests. Uh, but for them, it's a risk. Everything is out of
Yeah.
pocket. Their own hotel rooms and travel and all that. That's all out of pocket. It's just that devotion to the show. There are other shows where they try to maximize the amount of money they can make.
Yeah.
Uh, Drive up costs of for the vendors, or whether it's food service or the admission price, or a photo op or whatever, to the point where people start to back away and wonder if that part is worth it. And
Yeah.
when you get to that part, you're at a tipping point.
The pro wrestler, the Undertaker, I'm sure you heard of him. He charges $250,000 to appear at a convention.
Mm.
$500 for your photo and autograph. Crazy.
Well, there are some people who might save up and be very dedicated.
Yeah.
Well, Henry Ford in this country developed the Model T, and his philosophy was every time I lower the cost of the Model T by $1, I can sell 1,000 more of them.
Hmm.
So there's that aspect too, whereby you don't have to charge a lot if you're trying to be fan friendly. If you're for whatever reason, people, when you raise your prices, it lowers demand. It just brings out a certain number of people who can afford that, or who are willing to wait in line for 6 or 8 or 10 hours, whatever it may be, to meet you. And the people I've met um, are average people who just happen to enjoy movies.
Yeah,
They and they don't want to give a week's wages for your autograph or your photo. I just
yeah,
raised mine for like $25 for an autograph. And
that's
I
very
thought
reasonable.
it's extremely reasonable compared to
Yeah,
many that I've seen. And but that keeps it approachable for a lot more people.
yeah,
And um, and I really have a good time talking with the fans too, whether they're 9 years old or 75 years old, whatever it may be, because fans are in all sizes and ages. We've had people come in from Japan, all over Europe, and Canada, just to see the people they've wanted to meet from these films.
yeah.
And part of my understanding is that I'm a bit of a fanboy myself in that regard. Like, okay, we say Creature from the Black Lagoon. This is Creech, my little buddy. Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of my all-time favorite films. And when I had a chance at a convention to meet Raku Browning, who was the creature underwater, my heart was huge that day because I had a chance to meet him, get his autograph, get a picture. I
You
would
were on
have,
the other side of the table.
yeah, I was over the moon with it. So I know I understand that admiration and the appeal, and you try as best as you can to understand that and to nurture it because it's people's ideal, and you want to
Yeah,
you're in a sense put up on a pedestal. You're an example. You have to show grace. You have to do a lot of things. Some people just don't care, but my God, if people are coming all these miles to see you, to talk to you, the least you can do is spend a little time with them and be gracious and find out who they are, where they're from, and
yeah,
what they liked about it, and what else they're interested in, as much as time allows. Uh,
exactly. Before we wrap up, Jim, I believe now, rumor has it, are you going to be linking up with Tom Savini again, or what kind of projects have you got coming up that you can talk about?
well, Tom had talked about doing Nightmare City some years ago,
Hmm.
and the location that they finally arrived at, I believe, was Puerto Rico,
Right.
and it got hit by a pretty bad storm. And it just recently got hit and is still under the water, literally about a third of the island.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's going to happen or if it's not going to happen. So I may or may not see something there. I have actually three other films that I have some small roles in coming up in the next couple of months, and actually the next couple of weeks. So I try to keep my hand in and try to be accessible. One of the things I like to do, Maurice, is to work and support independent films because in
Yeah.
my mind that's where all the new ideas are coming from, and people have a lot of different energy and passion and vigor to try to create something new. Maybe it's based on the old cabin in the woods idea, but if
Yeah.
they're going to do something unique with it, group of people get isolated and okay, right, make it interesting. Give me a good script and turn me loose. I'd love to do it. So I just love to be in films and to work with the people who are making films. It's a creative process. It's a lot of fun. You make so many new friends, and I encourage anybody who's interested in being in films. See if they're being made in your area. I know in Ireland you've got such great scenery, backdrops. Um, there are a good number of films being made there. But
Yeah.
if you can find out about them, maybe, hey, can you help with driving somebody to the airport or bringing in meals? It doesn't mean that there's a film being made and you're going to be the star. You got to start somewhere and learn a little bit about what the protocols are, what you do on set, what you don't do on set,
Hmm.
the preparation you need, and your interactions with people, and what lighting is, what sound is, how they work, and you can't be tapping your foot or your fingers when the cameras are rolling and the microphone is on, because very sensitive equipment will pick up every noise in the region. So anyway, just start small. Look for something, whether it's community theater, local theater in your area. Try helping with lights. You don't have to run them. Just see what they do, how they work. For me, it's a fascinating process how it all comes together. And once you see some of those aspects, it helps you sit through the credits at the end of the movie when you see, oh, what's a greensman? You know, what's a what's a gaffer? Who are these people? What do they do? And you see hundreds of them in a major film, because that's what it takes to make these 5 or 6 people on screen look good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to always be appreciative and grateful, but it's good to have an understanding of the technology and the equipment.
Yeah. And Jim, before we wrap up, if people want to follow your work, where's the best place to do that?
Well, I am easily found on Facebook at Jim Krut, Krut, and I have my website, Helizombie, HeliZombie, helizombie.com. And on there, I have my shirts and photos for autographs and upcoming appearances. I can't really talk about some of the films that I will be working on until the people who are the producers and the directors decide to put out more publicity or release certain parts of it. So I can't
Yes.
talk about those. I'm also on IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, and you can see the films I've been in and a couple that are in production. And some of them I hope get finished and released. Sometimes these things happen. You do your best, you're in a film, and it doesn't see the light of day. And that's another thing you just have to be prepared for. Don't, put your heart and soul and passion into it, but don't get hung up if things go wrong.
Yeah. Jim, absolute pleasure. We might catch up again soon then, maybe when some of these projects can come to light. We'll have a conversation again.
That'd be fine and dandy, Murders. Hey, it's been a real
Yeah.
pleasure to talk with you. And
Same with you.
maybe I'll get over there sometime.
Hopefully. We get an
Okay.
old horror convention going in our